All right, so let's jump into this pile of financial news. You sent over a pretty interesting mix this time.
Yeah, this is quite the collection.
We've got open banking, really starting to make some moves. And then we've got a major bank outage causing all sorts of problems for folks.
Right.
Oh, and even a little bit of space travel sprinkled in there. You've been keeping an eye on some pretty diverse stuff.
Well, it's all connected in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I mean, these stories might seem completely separate at first glance, but
Right.
there's got to be some underlying threads connecting them all, right?
Exactly. And I think it's fascinating to see how those connections play out, like how these seemingly isolated events can actually reveal bigger trends in finance and tech.
That's what I'm hoping we can unpack today. So are you ready to dig in and maybe uncover some of those aha moments?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, perfect. So why don't we start with this article about open banking gaining traction in Mexico? It seems like a pretty significant development.
Yeah, it definitely is.
What caught my eye was this partnership between Belvo, they're an open finance platform, right?
That's right.
And JP Morgan Payments. They're bringing automated direct debit systems to Mexico, which sounds kind of technical, but
It is.
I think has huge implications, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about all those recurring payments businesses handle. Things like utility bills, subscription services, even loan payments and car payments.
Yeah,
It's a lot to manage.
it is.
And this partnership could really streamline all of that, Make it way more efficient for businesses and easier for consumers like us.
So instead of manually paying all those bills every month, this tech could basically automate everything.
Exactly. Imagine fewer late fees because you forgot to pay your internet bill, or a simpler way to manage all your subscriptions. This has the potential to be a real game changer for everyone involved.
Okay, so for someone like me who occasionally forgets to pay a bill or two, that definitely sounds appealing. But I'm also curious about the bigger picture here. You mentioned that this highlights how open banking is giving consumers more control over their financial data. Can you explain that a little bit more? Like, how does it actually give me more control?
Sure. So with open banking, you can securely share your financial information with third-party apps and services. And these apps can help you do all sorts of things: budget better, make smarter investments, even find better deals on loans. The key is you're the one in control. You decide which apps get access to your data and how it's used.
So it's like I'm finally getting a say in how my data is being used instead of it just being out there in the ether somewhere.
Exactly. It's about putting you back in the driver's seat when it comes to your financial life.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got this really positive development with open banking gaining momentum in Mexico. But on the other side of things, we've got this Capital One situation. While folks down in Mexico are embracing this new technology, thousands of Capital One customers in the U.S. can't even access their accounts right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a different story up north.
This news about their system outage, it's pretty concerning, to be honest.
I mean, think about it. People can't access their accounts. Direct deposits are delayed. It's a huge mess. And it really highlights just how reliant we've become on these digital financial systems.
Right. We trust them with our money, our personal information.
Exactly. And when they fail, it can have a ripple effect throughout our lives. I mean, it's not just about missing a Netflix payment. We're talking about people who might not be able to make rent, pay essential bills, or even buy groceries.
And that lack of access, that feeling of being locked out of your own finances, it has to be incredibly stressful, especially if you're already living paycheck to paycheck.
Absolutely. It's more than just an inconvenience. It's a real vulnerability, especially in today's world where everything is becoming increasingly digital. We're putting a lot of faith in these systems, maybe even more faith than we realize.
And this outage is really raising some questions, isn't it? Like, are we putting too much trust in these systems that, let's face it, can be vulnerable to glitches, errors, or even cyber attacks?
It's a valid question. And I think it's one that both the financial industry and individual consumers need to grapple with.
Yeah, I think you're right. But the timing of this whole thing is pretty interesting too, don't you think?
How so?
Well, while Capital One is dealing with this PR nightmare, their competitors are having a field day. JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, they're all reporting record-breaking profits, stock prices are climbing. It's almost like a tale of two cities in the banking world.
It is. It really highlights the competitive landscape, doesn't it? And it makes you think, in a world where we're increasingly reliant on digital finance, how much does a bank's reliability and reputation factor into our choices?
It's a good question. And I think for a lot of people, those factors might be more important than ever before. I mean, it really makes you wonder what's going on behind the scenes at these big institutions.
Right.
Are they investing enough in security, in making sure their systems are resilient? Or are they just focused on profits?
Well, it's always a balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I do think this Capital One outage could be a bit of a wake-up call for the industry. A reminder that they need to prioritize cybersecurity, communicate clearly during these kinds of situations, and maybe even be more proactive about mitigating risks in the first place.
Yeah, that transparency thing is a really good point. I mean, it would have been great if Capital One had just been more upfront about what was happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
To give people a realistic timeline for when they could expect things to be back to normal. That would have at least eased some of the stress and uncertainty.
Yeah, I think people just want to know what's going on.
Right.
Clear and timely communication can go a long way in building trust, especially during a crisis.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, we have open banking, making strides down in Mexico, pushing the boundaries of innovation.
Right.
And on the other hand, we have this major bank outage here in the US exposing some of the vulnerabilities of these digital systems we rely on so much. It's kind of a fascinating contrast, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, it just shows you how dynamic things are right now in both tech and finance. We're seeing the potential and the pitfalls all at the same time.
Yeah, it's a bit of a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
But speaking of pushing boundaries, let's switch gears for a second and talk about something completely different.
Okay.
SpaceX and their Starship launch. Did you catch any of the coverage?
Oh, yeah, I did. How could you miss it? It's not every day you see a rocket that massive takeoff. And this is the one Elon Musk wants to use to send people to Mars eventually.
That's crazy, right? I mean, just the scale of it all.
It's incredible.
This test flight was aiming for a near-orbit trip around the globe, even carrying dummy satellites to practice deployment. Talk about ambitious.
Yeah, they were really going for it. And while it didn't go exactly as planned, it still provided some valuable data and experience. I mean, the booster landed back on Earth successfully, which is a huge accomplishment in itself.
That's true. I mean, that booster landing was pretty spectacular, like something straight out of a movie.
It was.
But unfortunately, they did lose contact with Starship, and it ended up exploding.
Yeah, it was a setback for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that setbacks are often part of the process, especially when you're pushing the limits of technology like SpaceX is.
That's a good point. I mean, whether it's space exploration or the evolution of financial technology, it seems like both involve a certain amount of calculated risk. That constant push for innovation and understanding that failures can be valuable learning experiences.
Right. I mean, you're not going to get anywhere if you're afraid to try new things and maybe break a few things along the way.
Exactly. So when we look at these seemingly unrelated stories, the open banking advancements, the Capital One outage, the SpaceX launch, it's interesting to see how they all kind of tie back to this idea of pushing boundaries, of embracing innovation, but also acknowledging the risks that come with it.
That's a great observation. I think you're right. There's a common thread there for sure.
Yeah, and it's like one is dealing with our money, really sensitive stuff, and the other is like literally trying to send humans to another planet.
I know. It's amazing, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, you're right. They both share that common theme, that willingness to push boundaries, to take risks, to innovate. In finance, we're seeing that with the rise of open banking and all these new technologies popping up. And with SpaceX, it's about pushing the limits of space travel, turning those sci-fi fantasies into reality.
And sometimes those fantasies explode on re-entry.
Well, yeah, there are going to be setbacks along the way.
True. So, okay, we've covered a lot, but if I'm trying to connect all these dots, what does all of this mean for the average person? Like, how should I be thinking about all these developments in terms of my own money, my own financial decisions?
That's the big question, right? And honestly, I think it comes down to each individual's comfort level with risk and their own financial goals. I mean, are you someone who's excited about open banking, all those cool features, and the potential for more control over your data? Or does that Capital One outage make you a little hesitant about putting too much trust in digital systems?
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of having more control, more options. But seeing a major bank go offline like that, it definitely makes you think twice about where you're keeping your hard-earned cash.
No, for sure. I totally get it. And maybe this whole experience just highlights how important it is to do your research, Understand the risks, think about what's important to you in terms of security and transparency when choosing a financial institution. And hey, even diversifying where you keep your money could be a smart move too.
Diversifying. Yeah, that's interesting. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right?
Exactly.
But I guess taking a step back, I also wonder how all this ties into the bigger picture of technology. You know, like we're seeing incredible innovation, but also some pretty significant hiccups along the way. It seems like a constant balancing act almost.
It is a balancing act. We're in this uncharted territory with technology advancing at an unprecedented rate, and there's going to be some level of risk and uncertainty that comes with that. I think the key is to approach it all with a healthy dose of curiosity. Be willing to learn, but also keep a critical eye out for potential problems.
So be informed, ask questions, stay engaged, but maybe don't blindly trust every shiny new tech that comes along.
Exactly.
Well, this has been quite the conversation. We've gone from open banking in Mexico to a major bank outage right here at home to even touching on the wild world of space travel. It's been a wild ride.
It really has. But hopefully it's been a thought-provoking one, too. I mean, these are the kinds of things we need to be talking about, considering as we move forward in this rapidly changing world.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's always a pleasure picking your brain. Until next time.